tell me about the train in your school.
Of course, wanted to have a physical train at the heart of the school because it's a tribute to the school that inspired our work, our birth. After 25 years of traveling life, trains retire and then they're just thrown away for scrap. So we auctioned with the Indian Railways and got this train. It's called 92410. It had its traveling years of 25 years and it was retiring. So we auctioned it and we were bringing it to school. And now, of course, it's been converted into a library. When you go there and you see the books and you can sit in that bogie, I think you fall in love with books.
I want to know who your village is, because it's not an easy dream that you have pursued. And this village also has to endure everything along with you, right?
The children are also a big part of my village.
Yeah.
At some point for something we had said that, the school doesn't have resources to make this football ground or something. And I remember one child who had saved some 23 rupees and put it in an envelope with a beautiful letter saying, Akka, I would like to gift this to the school so you can make the football ground.
Oh,
and I was saying, like, this.
Can you tell me about reading, Santhya?
I taught myself to read and I spent a lot of time in libraries. Also because I didn't have any friends. That loneliness was very difficult, and I think when I found books, I had this experience of just once going into the library in the school and seeing these children sitting around with books, and this one child lying down and a book flipped over like that.
Okay.
And busily actually reading. And I think that's what it is, right?
During challenging times, seeking inspiration from others can be a very powerful tool for personal growth. Hello, I'm Gayathri Prakash and you are watching Brewing Inspirations by Brewing Reflections. I believe in the power of drawing inspiration from others. During very challenging times, I have looked to those close to me for guidance, and recognizing that not everybody has this support, I created this platform to share diverse stories and strategies with you, acknowledging that inspiration is unique to each individual. Welcome to my library. I have here with me today a dynamic personality, from being considered an oddball to finding the most effective space for herself in this society, right at the center of young hearts. Santhya is one relentless source of positivity and a true inspiration for hundreds of families that have placed their trust in her. The founder of the famous Yellow Train School in Coimbatore, known for its new, organic method of teaching with love at the center of it all. A Bharat Ratna Award winner, one of the most grounded people I have ever met. The first time I heard of the Yellow Train School was almost a decade ago. Someone told me about the school and described it as, the school is just like the one that Amir Khan runs in the movie Three Idiots. Imagine what that would be like for a child. Thank you so much for being here, being a part of my podcast. It's an honor, to be honest. Can we start from the beginning?
Yes.
Santhya, can you tell me about your childhood? I know you went to school only at the age of 8. And, there's something interesting there as well. And when I was reading about you, what I felt was that's where the whole idea of having a very positive childhood, the difference that it makes, has been the root for what you are doing today. So can you just take me through your childhood days, what it was? And one of your students who's writing about you was telling me that, her life was passing by as she watched from a window. So that was something very interesting for me to hear. So if you can tell me what your life has been like in the beginning, it'll be a great start.
I think when you said that something about my own childhood has a strong relationship with the work that I do in the world, I think that's what I think my own destiny has been about.
Right.
So I really think that a lot of what I do today, my almost irrational love for children and having built this school founded on love for children, all of that comes because I think I didn't have that childhood. And therefore there is a strong impulse in me to want to protect it for the children around me. So I think that's really at the very core for me in terms of my life and my work. Okay, as a child, I mean, I had some illnesses because of it, which I couldn't walk and in bed for many years. But as a result of that, I was this really withdrawn and frightened child who had no social skills to be in the world.
Right.
And I didn't speak English, and I was very overwhelmed with everything around me when I first went to school. And I think my own coping was to retreat into my inner world. So from when I was very young, you know, on our school website, we have these lines that says the world inside is larger than the world outside.
I believe in it.
I think my early childhood was that. The world outside was very difficult to navigate, to engage, let alone master. So my way was really retreating into the world inside. So that rich inner world has been cultivated from then. And I think now when I see young children, and even when I see children who are contending with difficult young lives, while a part of me is saddened, another part of me knows that that way of contending with struggles, with crisis, is really about forming, deforming, shaping, and building something really for the future. So yeah, my childhood was not really much of a childhood. Yeah, and I'm acutely aware of it every day in the school, I think. And in a way, I think the school has been my own response to building a childhood for myself. So yeah, sometimes you can see...
Feeding your inner child.
Yeah, when I'm in school that I am very much the small child. Not always, but yeah, very often I get in touch with that.
Yeah.
The joy, the spontaneity, the creative energy.
My God. Can you tell me about reading, Sandhyaka? I know that a big part of your childhood also you have spent reading a lot of books from the library and, the newspaper, to be specific. Your father used to give you assignments as he left. Can you tell me something about that? Because I feel reading has to be inculcated at a younger age for children, to feed that inner child as well.
I mean, thank you for asking this because I think it's a big journey in my life. And I think as a young child, when I talked about retreating into the inner world because the outer world was too scary, I think part of that escapade was books. I think I taught myself to read and I spent a lot of time in libraries. Also because I didn't have any friends. I didn't know how to make one. Therefore, meeting that loneliness was very difficult. And I think when I found books, it looked like finally I can escape into a fairy tale of sorts, a magical land of sorts through those books. So I think I was living life quite vicariously through books because my own real life and real childhood was devoid of joy, friendships, play, nothing that ideally childhood must have. So books became my friends, my world, the magic that I couldn't find in everyday life. Everything I got from books. And I think from very early on, I always walked wherever I went, carried a set of books in my bag. Whether I read them or not, it didn't matter. Like when I saw Toto Chan here, I said, okay, it's comforting to have a book here, So book has been a comfort, a companion. And through that, I think I explored the world. And I also escaped, to be honest. And even now, recently I got in touch with this reality where when my life gets a little difficult to contend with, then I find myself reading a lot of fiction suddenly. Because I feel that I'm really escaping into other worlds. That's exciting and joyful and magical and mysterious and all of that, while my own life may lack that at that time. So, yeah, they began as escapades, but I think they've been like very, very a big character in the story of my life. And at school today, I feel, books are really like the biggest gift we want to give our children. If a child is reading, then we feel that our task in education is almost done. So, yeah, that's just how I feel about books.
Interestingly so, I think there was a phase in my life where I was away from my parents for a couple of years, and I was never a reader. I always used to write, like I told you. I started picking up fiction, and then I started reading. Like you said, it was just, for me, I would just escape into another space. And I wouldn't allow anyone to talk to me. I'll probably be inside a room, shut in, for hours together reading, because I didn't want to be missing my home, but at the same time, I wanted to be very happy myself. So I think it is a great coping mechanism, and then it becomes a habit. Yeah. So, it's beautiful. The gift of reading is the best gift you can give to a child.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that my second son, he has a mini library. He doesn't know how to read, but he loves flipping through books. He'll make me sit and read 10 books a day for him. So, it's something that he's kind of in that dreamland all the time. And it's so lovely to watch them do that as well.
Yeah, when you say that he doesn't know how to read, I have this experience of just once going into the library in the school and seeing these, children sitting around with books, and there's one child lying down and a book flipped over like that.
Okay.
And busily actually reading. And I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
To find that beautiful something and being lost in that world. Even if they don't read, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because they're still engaging with that world when they're very young.
Yeah. It's really something amazing. So going to a library, Akka, I understand that your father was a minimalist.
Yeah.
And how was that for you growing up? How have you incorporated that into your life today? I know that he never wanted to buy the books. He'd rather take you to a library, or, he'd only have a certain number of clothing for himself and for the entire family, only when it, tore or something, to replace it. So how is that? It's so interesting, because we are all people who overload on things. We buy too much. We, stock too much. We are always wanting to be prepared for some emergency. So we keep stocking up. We are hoarders, basically. And there is a scope for hoarding, in today's world, because everything is so easily accessible. So how do you look at that?
It's interesting when you say minimalist, because I think Appa and Amma were minimalist because it wasn't a choice. They didn't have much.
Okay.
Right. And there was a certain grace and dignity about that. We had a, like you said, like if one of our 3 kurtas tore, then we replaced it, or we never owned books, but we were just taken to libraries. And I think that minimalism was part of their living. They didn't want more. They had less. And therefore, minimalism was a way to live that life. And that didn't change even when we had a little bit more. And I think mine, if I look at my life today, I don't know if it's honest to say minimalism, because then it's a choice right now, because I don't inhabit that space that Amma and Appa inhabited, or I did as a child. But what I do see in the school, for instance, or at home, is that, for instance, in school, there's a lot in terms of the land and the animals and the space itself, which is very beautiful. And yet, in the classrooms, there are just little chowkis on which children sit or put it away. So I think in spirit, to have, to know what you need and to have that, but not more, I think still lives in me. But I would be lying if I said I live a minimalist life at the moment. And I know the impact of Appa's minimalism was when I first went to work and I started earning. I bought books with a vengeance. Because I never owned books. I only went to libraries to read. So, whether I read them or not, I would just go on the day my salary came and buy books. And, I remember when Appa would visit our home and he would say, "Do you really read all these books?" And I think that was a part of that cynical voice that said, do you really need them and do you really read them? But I think I've not outgrown that vengeance to own books. So there it's far from minimalism. It just gives me joy to be in a room which is full of books. But yeah, I don't live that. But I think some spirit of that lives in me. And, sometimes when I travel or when I think about a future and I feel like truly if I didn't have any of this, I still think I would live a very content life.
I think there's a foundation.
Yeah, there is a foundation.
And understanding that even when your father could afford at whichever point that was, he did not indulge.
Yeah.
And that understanding is very difficult to have because many people by themselves, they would have held themselves back for a long time and they would have just gone, like something expanded and just was left off.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great foundation per se, if you see.
Yeah.
So if, when you finished your education and when you wanted to pursue your PhD, I understand that your father was not at that point able to support you financially. This is a scenario in many homes, Akka. Where there is disappointment that the parents are not able to support a child, with their dreams, at that point. How did you handle that emotion? Because I know you have seen your father. He has done everything he can for you. But still there is that, that little bit of, can this not happen? That sort of disappointment is something that, many people battle with.
Yeah. I think I wanted to go to study overseas. I wanted to study education, even though I didn't know whether I'd come back and become a teacher. So I had some lofty dreams a 20-something young person can have. And I recognized that my family may not be able to support me with that. I think what I realize now, Gayathri, is I was one of those grateful children and not the entitled ones. So I didn't feel I was entitled to an education in an Ivy League or even my postgrad. I felt very grateful that, I was sponsored for it. So while there was disappointment, I think the fact that I had what I had, I was immensely grateful. And something that I see today in young people, because I work with a lot of young people, adolescents. I'm a high school teacher. I see a lot of young people feel the entitlement that their families must offer them this or that. And I don't think in my generation, anyway, we had that. But I particularly didn't have it. So that disappointment wasn't even a big thing. But for many years, I have thought that, I would have really loved to study. And now sometimes I think, my older daughter's left home and my younger one would leave home in 3 years. I sometimes think that when they're both gone and my task as a mother is almost at one stage complete in some way, it's never complete, but at that time, I feel like I still want to go and study, so I think there's some part of that that's still alive. And I think I'd be always a student. I think there's nothing that I enjoy as much as being a student.
Yes.
So I would be a student and maybe I would still pursue it someday.
Wow. So when you say that you work with young adults who have expectations of their family, how do you approach it? How do you tell them that, your thinking has to change a slight bit? Or why don't you be grateful for what you're already given and then build on that?
See, Gayathri, I think when I'm working with the adolescent children, adolescents, I feel a moral perspective or taking an approach which is preaching is a sure way they're going to shut the door on you. Right? So I rarely go there. I think I have perhaps in my former years, but I've learned that it doesn't meet them. So often what I do is I think I go to a place of inquiry. So for instance, now I do a lot of college advisory work for students in the school. And I ask them questions like, what do you think mom and dad have in terms of financial, wealth? And how much have they kept aside for education and what is saving? And could you go on a student loan or do you want to take this money from them? Or would you borrow this money? I remember once I asked a student, are you going to borrow this from your parents? And he said, what do you mean borrow this? I never thought of it like that. I said, but would you like to think of it like that? So I think what I do is I come from a place of inquiry. And sometimes I feel that's already a great place, because then people go back home and sit down with their parents and try to ask them these questions, which a lot of homes don't willingly invite children into those spaces, right? Sometimes you want to stretch and sacrifice and offer some things to your children, but you don't necessarily, you don't have to make them your equal, but to really, treat them as young adults and sit with them and make transparent what the family financial picture looks like, for instance, among the many things. So when I come from a place of inquiry and create some questions, I think, in their hearts, then they travel that path and they find those things. And then I feel something shifts for them. I've seen one of my students who, after this inquiry, decided, I'm going to go on a student loan. And I find that there's more agency for me to do that than to have to take it from dad and mom. And he did that. So I feel like good questions is often how I like to accompany young people.
That's great.
And I think that meets them where they are.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, preaching is going to shut doors.
Yeah, I think so, especially with young people.
Yeah. And children these days are very logical, is what I feel. You just put that thought in their head and then allow it to grow and then see where it ends. It's amazing how that is. For yourself, however, I want to understand, Akka, from not being very satisfied in a corporate world to, taking a leap of faith of sorts to jump into this. How has that journey been like?
When you say not satisfied with the corporate world, I only remember the many, many coffee breaks where I would sit in the cafeteria and my colleagues would be around. And I would tell them, like, soon I'm not going to do this work and I'm going to go and build a school of my dreams. At which time, I think it was more an articulation of something. I had no idea how I was going to do it. But there came a time where I think my disillusionment with what I saw around in the name of education was growing. When I saw young people being tasked with reading and writing, or when I saw competition as a main tool to promote excellence, or school cultures becoming so performative in nature. When I would see these things, I was very young and I don't think I had my own clear ideas of what would be an alternate educational philosophy, but I still would feel anger, I would feel disillusionment, and I would feel like, I must offer an alternative to this, to children. And that feeling was, I think, growing. And when I became a mother and I had my daughter Kimaya go into the kindergarten, and then when I started engaging with the ecosystem called schools a lot more actively as a mother, I think I really felt that, I must explore my own dreams there. And now sometimes when I look back, I feel it was almost some kind of a bravado, because here I was young with nothing really, and wanting to start a school. But I think it was some kind of a raw courage. But deeper than that, I think it was a destiny question, because my own unlived childhood had been a seed to find something which was more about preserving childhood. It wasn't so much about learning and, academic infrastructure around which I had some, new or unique ideas. But I think I had a feeling for what it means to preserve childhood. I had a feeling for what it means to love children. I think that's what I had. And I felt a school must be around that. I think that is all I had as a seed. And somehow I think I had the raw courage of a young person who didn't perhaps, who wouldn't have done the math and the thinking and the self-doubt, which maybe an older person could have had. I think there was a time where I just said, yeah, we have to do this now, or it would never be. And and then Yellow Train started as a small seed with 3 children.
Wow. So, one of the things that is happening today is fear of starting something new, because there are so many people asking us, have you thought this through?
Yeah.
What are your expectations of what you're going to do? And how far are you going to get with it? Do you have a plan in hand? Do you have your financials ready? What are you going to make out of this? There is that fear of losing something even before you start. Can you tell me very briefly? I know your idea was driven by a passion to protect childhood. Were there any voices that you were, controlling within your head? And were there voices that you were empowering within your mind? Would you be able to put, a pin on these things? This is how I did it, because that would be something very helpful for youngsters who are up and coming and they want to start something new, but there's so much fear of, not making it.
Recently, I learned this song that says, "The way knows the way." You don't have to know the way. The way knows the way. And I think when I look back at my journey, I think it was that, the way knows the way. And I think it's the fear of the unknown, right? And I did have my fears, I remember reading something, courage isn't about not having fear. Courage is about having the fear and doing it anyway, right? So I don't think it was a fearless pursuit of what I really longed to give birth to, as much as it was about having those fears. But I think the irrational dreamer in me was so strong and so unstoppable that this fearful little voice, which I also have and had, wouldn't have stopped. And I think there, Gayathri, my own, sense of knowing is that when something in you lives very strongly, and when you can nurture that, I think it finds a way to manifest. It's the alchemist story of conspiracy, right? Something really, as long as you're not stopping it and burying it, and if you're just allowing it to take roots, I think it just bursts forth. And my experience was that. And I do know this feasibility study and, and a predictability and a certainty. And I do still remember, we were going to sell our home and put that as a seed capital and start the school. And the night before that, a few friends who are very good with financial acumen came in to do the math, and they had these Excel sheets and all of that, and by 4 a.m. almost they said, there's just no way you're going to make this work, because you have this idea of it being a small school, or you have so many of these ideals, and you've come into Coimbatore, which also isn't a place that's fertile for an alternate school. So I don't think, the conclusion was that I don't think you must go and borrow from the bank, nor should you put your only house you have into this as a seed capital. So it was very conclusive, and I woke up in the morning and I told myself, even if I have to, go to jail because I won't be able to meet the financial, pressures of what I would have had to, take on at that time, I'd rather do that than not take this step. I think the conviction was very strong.
Wow.
I said to myself, okay, it looks irrational in this Excel sheet, but it looks like the right thing to do. And I think that's where this whole inner life comes alive, because if you are anchored in that place, and then you know that something about your destiny is closely linked to this journey, and you just know it. I don't think it's a rational thing. You just know it. And when you know it, I feel that it guides you. I think the way knows the way. I think that's what...
Way knows the way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's been my truth, Gayathri.
That's so lovely. Can you talk to me about the Yellow Train School?
Of course. When you drive through the highway in Coimbatore, and then you'll there's a dusty road that leads you into this little village called Mudalipalayam. And then you'll sort of drive into this place which is very quiet and you wouldn't see anything from the outside. And as you drive in, you'll see peacocks and you'll see rows of vegetables, you'll see cows.
Oh, wow.
And you'll see a lot of earth. And then, somewhere there is out of mud block, a school building. And when you walk in, on the left, you'll see a big yellow painting that says, "A school founded on love for children."
Wow.
And I think that is really the physical space where the school is. And I think this school has been a dream from when I was a child. The things that I didn't receive as a child, I longed to offer to children. And that was a school. And that's how I think it has remained in my heart for a long time. And 15 years ago, when I think the time was right that I could birth it, it was, of course, founded on a book that I read as a young person called Toto Chan. It's a story of, one man's love for children. Really, it's that. And it was like a secret school in Japan during the Second War. I think the story of what that school could offer every child in the school has remained with me, still remains with me as an inspiration. And I think Yellow Train is a response to that longing in me to offer something to children. And first and foremost, a place where children can belong, can be celebrated for who they are. I think today, Gayathri, I see that the world is very performative in nature, right? You go to workplace, it's about performance. You go to school, you go to educational conferences, you see that learning has to be measured, learning has to be quantified, and it's all about performance and measurement. And now, unfortunately, homes are becoming performative for children because you bring that substance from the school in the form of homework and in the form of grades. And that very little time you get in the day, in the evening, is also performative in nature. And I think for me, Yellow Train is fundamentally a relational space. I think it's a space where children live and grow in the process of human becoming. And I think, of course, the learning and those things are part of this whole ecosystem, but they are not the most exclusive and valuable part of being in Yellow Train, right? A child lives and grows there. So it is envisioned as a place, as a community. I'm surprised nowadays when I meet young children in middle school, high school, often they use this word community. And I feel like, wow, it's interesting that they use that word. So it is a community, and it's a community of teachers, it's a community of children, it's a community of parents. And I think the whole relational aspect is what grounds the work. And I think we all have experiences. If I asked you like which subject did you love very much, most adults are likely to say, I love this subject because I love this teacher, right? And the younger you are, the more you loved something because you loved the person who brought it to your life. So educational is very relational, right? And for young children, that is so primal in terms of need. And of course, with world of education is also deeply artistic, deeply soulful, deeply spiritual. And of course, it prepares them to meet the world by the time they finish their high school and senior school years. And like today we live in a very divided, fragmented, unwholesome, almost psychotic world, right? And, as we say that it's easier to bring or build strong human beings than to repair broken human beings. And I think in education, we have that task, really, to build up these young people. And, I think Yellow Train is really seeking to respond to all these very important life questions, And yeah, we've been privileged to accompany so many young children over these last 15 years in this journey. Yeah.
Wow. A school built out of love for children?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it seems like the most commonsensical thing, right? I mean, a school should be built on love for children. And yet today, if you look at the narrative, if you look at educational discourse, it's built on anything but love. It's built on needs of educational systems that govern education in the country. It is built on sometimes political needs, sometimes social needs, sometimes needs of parental bodies, and not so much on what's right for the child. So I think in our school, that founded on love for children is the North Star. And whenever we are at crossroads, whether it's about deciding what's a healthy timetable, or it's about deciding a school play, or it's about deciding how to bring education on sexuality to young people, or at what age to bring it, or I think any decision we make, I think the North Star and the first question is, does it serve the child? Yeah. And if a response to that is yes, then it's something that lives in us. And if it tells us that it doesn't serve the child, and even if it's something that will be a difficult one to execute, be it with the parent body or with any other forces, I think our response is still yes. I could tell you a story from COVID, right? We asked children to write letters because we've not been meeting children for those 18 months. And I don't know if you know that India has had the longest lockdowns in the world. We opened temples and tasmaks and malls, but we didn't bring our children back to school, And we asked all the children to write letters to the school. And, we didn't necessarily say write about anything. We just said, write to us. We want to read you. We want to see your handwriting. And when we opened those letters, we sat in a circle, all of us teachers. And when we opened those letters, almost every child was saying, like, I want to come back to school. And many children were actually articulating that, well, you can bring us back to children, can't you? I mean, they have some kind of trust in the adult world, our ability to do things for them. And it was, I think, wishful thinking. I don't think they even meant that really bring us back.
Yeah.
They knew the climate we lived in. And yet for us to read those letter after letter after letter in which there was a wishful thinking or longing to say we want to come back to school, we said, okay, we have to do something about this. And in response to that, we actually started, now I can almost say it publicly because it's long over and I think many people know of it. We started like secret schools in 32 locations.
Wow.
We met about 500 parents on Zoom and we said, our children are wilting because there's no social life, there's no play, there's no engagement with the world. And instead there is fear, there is gadget, and there is other things that are regressive. And can you as parent body lend us your gardens, your garages, your terraces, your living rooms, and we'll divide each class into one half, and so that the numbers are small, and we will of course sanitize and do all the things that are necessary, but we do like these secret schools. And in a week there were about 32 to 34 parents who said, yes, we'll offer you our homes and our terraces and whatever. And we ran it in about 32 locations in those many weeks.
Wow.
And I think at that time we knew that there was a risk. At that time we knew that, it wasn't the most logical or rational thing to do perhaps, but I think it felt like it was doing right by the child. And so I think at every moment when we've been at crossroads, I think we've gone back to that North Star and it's never let us down.
In fact, many of the things that I write, I feel like I write about going back to why you started something.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of what I've written is centered around that thought.
Yeah.
So when you lose your way, when you have a difficulty, go back to what you started it with, what the idea was, right?
Yes.
So that's an imbalance I see in schools today where they start for a particular reason. But what happens is either they're siding or, taking the opinions of parents to the T and incorporating it while losing their own, principles and, what they've built the school on. Or they completely shun off what the parents are saying. But the idea that putting the child at the center of all of this, right? I think it's a right place to start and continue in. I mean, you go back to your, that board where you started. And I think coming back to that is very important at different points in time. The situation may change, but your decision is based on what this rock solid, thought. It's there. It has to be there. And I think that's a great takeaway for me, because this sort of imbalance doesn't work a lot of times. And, it reflects directly on the child.
Of course.
And, it's beautiful. I think, after I read your profile, I started reading Toto-chan and, I was like, I was at crossroads myself with my first son. I was thinking, I should do something for him. I see there's a bit of a struggle somewhere. I want to do something for him. If it has inspired somebody to start a school, I should definitely read the book. And I started reading, and I'm halfway through the book. The Yellow Train. One thing that really struck up to wherever I've read, the train in the book. And where the the head of school is asking the children to bring their pajamas the night. Was it the exact situation when you had your bogie come into school? How was that? I mean, tell me about the train in your school.
Yeah, you know what? I think you can go to that page and exactly as if that page had come alive. That's exactly what that evening was. Because we, of course, wanted to have a physical train at the heart of the school because it's a tribute to the school that inspired our work, our birth. And many years ago, we learned that after 25 years of traveling life, trains retire and then they're just thrown away for scrap. So we auctioned with the Indian Railways and got this train. It's called 92410. It had its traveling years of 25 years and it was retiring. So we auctioned it and we were bringing it to school. And just like this book, all the children and all the parents had come the previous night and they had camped in the football ground with their tents.
Oh, wow.
And we had just made way for that big trailer to come in. And there were tents on either side. And around 3 in the morning, we realized that it couldn't actually come in because our school is you had to pass through a village to come into the school. And it couldn't navigate the road. So we had to almost like demolish part of a compound wall and all that happened. And early morning, there's a line in the book that says, it's as if, the sun was responding to the chants of the men that went heave ho, and they had to like get the train off onto the ground and the sun was rising. And it was exactly that. At about 5:30 in the morning, all the children were just coming out of their tents. And then here was this huge, enormous 92410 that was arriving. And and then the train had to be placed over logs of old coconut trees. And all the children with their blankets just coming and looking at it as if it was like coming out of a dream. And we read a few chapters from the book, and all of us, I think we could only have tears because it just seemed so surreal.
Wow.
And now that train, of course, has been converted into a library. And it's a place where the children love to go. And I think even if some child isn't a reader yet, when you go there and you see the books and you can sit in that bogie, I think you fall in love with books. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just imagine, as you were saying it, I'm imagining it in my head.
Yeah.
Like, I'm there. I'm there with you when you talk about it. Oh, yes, I will. I've already made a decision in my head now.
Please come there.
But I think it's like bringing your childhood dreams, recreating something that you've really loved reading. That's something different. I mean, that's it's not that many people would do it. I mean, that's something, you know, paying importance to your dream and bringing a childhood that you have lost, you know, to life it's beautiful, Akka. The journey is just fantastic. Now, I want to speak about this Waldorf method of teaching. You know, it says that children learn with their heads, hearts, and hands. And, you know, the organic teaching methods that you use with, you know, love for children, you know, in the mix of all of this. It's a tall ask, you know, in today's times, to find the right kind of teachers to, you know, kind of emulate that. It's not easy. Can you tell me more about how you know, work with this process, what your debriefing to the teachers are? Because it's just not you who are representing, you know, the school. It's a you know, it's a group of 50 teachers that are a part of your school today. How do you do it? I mean, could you tell me the process?
I mean, when you said it's a tall order, it is, right? I think we live in a world, like, if you go to most schools, like my generation, when you went to school and you asked young people, like, what do you want to grow up to be? People said they want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers, they want to be engineers, they want to be everything but a teacher. I don't think that has changed, right? I don't know how many people that went to school with you or college with you dreamt of becoming a teacher.
That was one of the sentences that I used in to introduce a teacher. In a forum that I spoke in recently, I said we all have different, you know, professions we were aspiring to be a part of, but never once do we say that we want to be a teacher.
Right?
Very true.
So I think that's a challenge, right? That makes teaching isn't romanticized, right? Like other professions are. Teaching actually is very difficult. I mean, I think long back I read a teacher and a gardener have the most fulfilling jobs on this planet, because what you work with grows in front of your eyes, and there can be nothing more fulfilling than that. And I know that, having been one for the last 15 years. But I do know that there aren't too many people who are aspiring, who are dreaming of becoming teachers, which means finding a passionate, committed, skilled teacher is really, really difficult. So that's been part of, I think, the journey to build this community. We have 72 teachers now, and to have built this community has not been easy, and it's an ongoing task. I think one of the things that we have said is we want someone who loves children, who's passionate about education and renewing the landscape of education or building a new narrative in education. And if you've got these two things, that's what we're looking for. In fact, we're not looking for someone who's been a teacher, you know, or who has a B.Ed. None of that. You know, if you've got these two, and then we're willing to work with you. And we've crafted our own teacher development program, and people come in and work for a year with a senior teacher, and in the process understand the philosophy, understand childhood. We study child development. So it's not been easy, and I think whoever's watching this, I feel it'll be so valuable if, you know, we change this narrative about teaching and becoming a teacher. Sometimes, you know, in our school, we do plant these seeds with young children, right? And many of the children say, I want to grow up to be a teacher. And that's, I think, you know, very fulfilling for me to listen to. And teaching is also very, very much a process about selfhood. You know, in our school, we say that the teacher is the unwritten curriculum. We teach who we are, right? So the content and the technique will arrive, but we actually teach from a place of selfhood. You know, we know often, you know, parents would come and tell us, you know, for instance, when I'm thinking I do this, and then one of my parents said to me that, you know, my son, he also, when he's thinking, he looks exactly like how you do this. And that's like a frightening moment because you know that the children imitate
they're mirroring you.
not just what is outside, but what is inside too. So as a teacher, you have to be constantly working with your inner life, with selfhood, with who you are, your beliefs. That's like osmosis in a classroom. Children just absorb that, right? For instance, people ask us, like, how do you do inclusive education? I mean, it's in the air. The children watch us and then the children learn what is inclusion.
Correct.
It's not taught through moral studies or any of those instructional methods. So it's an ongoing journey, and that's a place that we have invested deeply in, knowing that finding a good teacher and making a good teacher is really a tall order and a difficult ask. Yeah, but a lot of this work in our school is founded on the individual, on selfhood, on knowing who you are. Because I think that's what's most fundamental in teaching, which is also quite overlooked because the pedagogy, the curriculum, the assessment methods become central in the classroom.
Yeah.
Not so much an understanding of yourself and the child.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. I think there's a deep connection within, if you have to emulate something like this.
Yeah.
There has to be a deep connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is there a process that you use to ensure that the teachers who come in, whom you've selected to be a part of your school, go through rigorous training to understand this?
Yes. In the beginning, of course, teachers work with a senior teacher and the Professional Development Center works with the new teachers. But also teachers who've been teachers for a long time, we also see ourselves as students of this whole process of education, right? We're constantly investing, a lot of time year after year after year in being students, in learning. Yeah. And I think that has been quite the cornerstone of why we are able to do what we are able to do.
That's something else also. It's very refreshing to see that, there are schools that think this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not just doing it to be present somewhere.
Yes.
It's, if I had an opportunity, I would probably just close my eyes and put my children in a school like this.
Welcome.
Akka, one thing that I see a lot of parents, I speak to a lot of parents. I come across many people and I ask them, why are you doing certain boards of education for children still?
Yeah.
It's become a very common thing that you move them, out of a regular board into, an ICSE or an IB or, alternate schooling. The first thing they tell me is, why should I change? It worked for me. I'm perfectly fine. I'm doing very well, in my career. And I feel like this is reality, my child should not suffer when he gets out of a different board. And there are not many universities that support, alternate school, children coming out of alternate schools or IB boards yet in India. I think this is the best place to be. I don't want to make the shift. It's very comfortable. And I'm able to resonate with what's being taught because that's the teaching method that I have gone through. And I understand it. I'm sure my child will just figure it out.
Yeah.
How do you respond to, this way of thinking? I'm not saying it's a wrong way to think, but I find that, there needs to be progression even there.
Yeah.
Some days I find myself looking for words to say, you can think beyond this as well for your child.
Yeah.
How does one respond to something like this?
When you said IB, IGCSE, CBSE, it's like jumble letters, right? And it's not, there's no need for a parent to have to understand all of this.
Yeah.
It's a task of an educator, right? And a task of a school. Now, when you say, of course, there is comfort in a known system.
Yes.
Yeah. Always anything familiar gives you comfort. I think there's no harm, right? But for me, the question isn't about will my child fit into the world after going to a school like Yellow Train, whose promise and proposition is very different from a mainstream school. Right? And often the question the parents would ask you is, will my child fit in?
Yes.
Fit into what? Fit into the world outside. And my response is, why should your child fit in? Because I don't know if we are saying, hey, the world outside is fabulous, just go fit in. I think we are contending with the world, with the climate change, with political, ecological crisis, with violence, with crime, with everything that's happening. We are inhabiting a very conflicted, divided, fragmented world. And I don't know, as educators, if we have to look at our children and say, hey, go fit into that world. I think we want to tell our children, go change that world. Work for peace, work for change, maybe work for revolution, right? You want to send children into the world who are going to go there and ask uncomfortable questions to the world, who are going to break some existing patterns which are very harmful for people and the world. And if you want that out of our children, which I think we all must want, then we have to ask ourselves, does this current system serve that master of change, of something new? And I imagine it doesn't. Because if you look at the current system, long back, I listened to a speaker who said, Indian education is neither Indian nor education. And at that time, I was very angry. But actually, if I look at it, I think it's true. Right? I mean, during the British times, this educational system was created so we could go into the clerical task of the nation. Right?
Correct.
Not thinking, creative, leadership, change-making, rule-breaking, new order. Correct. That was not the task.
Correct.
We were prepared for clerical tasks. I mean, are we today preparing our children for clerical tasks? We don't, right? For math, for instance, speed and accuracy is outdated. Today we are looking at application, right? Or getting your spelling and handwriting done. Yeah, there is merit in having spelling and handwriting, but we are really looking at higher order thinking skills, right? And some of the old systems don't acknowledge the need for this change, right? And today I think we have to prepare children, like I read in research that in my generation, people had maybe different jobs within a same career. But this generation that will go into contributing to the world will have multiple careers within maybe 2 decades. Yes. Maybe they start out in neuroscience, maybe they become an artist after, and maybe they go into some law after, who knows. So I think the meta skill of learning to learn,
correct,
and having emotional intelligence and knowing yourself and being confident with who you are, some of these things will serve them in a world which I don't think you and I have the capacity actually to foresee. Right?
Absolutely.
So you're preparing them for an unknown world which the educators of today can't even fathom or foresee.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I therefore think to teach them these meta skills will be the task of the new age educator, which then means you have to challenge the old systems. And Gayathri, today the Indian educational landscape is changing. Indian universities are also becoming liberal. They're also inviting new age alternate schools, and our children don't stand at any disadvantage compared to a child who's coming from any other Indian board. And long back there was this book, a green color book that was published, which said the alternate schools in India. Long back, I'm talking about 25 years ago, 20 years ago. It used to be about 20 pages. Today that book is growing, which means the alternate school movement in India is growing.
Yes.
Which means more and more people believe that the landscape of education must change. So I think for the new parents, if they can replace fear with faith, every child coming into this world knows, somewhere the soul knows what that child is going to do. And if we can just allow the unfolding to be as gentle, as nurturing as we can, I think the child is going to find this mystery, right?
Absolutely.
And if we can replace those fears with faith in the child's destiny, I think alternate schools and schools that are challenging some of the mainstream discourse is really what is going to serve the young child who's going into a future which is going to be a really, I don't know, I don't even know what I can say about that future because I can't see it as clearly as I can see today, right?
Very
Yeah.
true. Very,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much clarity and research in what you are speaking. You're not just speaking lightly, saying, you know, it is absolutely true that we don't know what's going to happen in the coming years.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
prepare the child for change,
Yeah.
to be adaptable, which we find so difficult. Today, if you take my mother, her career has been so strange.
Yeah.
She was a lawyer for 25 years. She said quits one day, now she's an artist.
You see? And your mother's generation is doing that.
Yes.
So your children's generation will do things which our generation can't imagine.
Yes.
And we are preparing our children for that world.
Absolutely. And in fact, I did one, I was just facilitating a conversation in one of the unschooling, they call it the unschooling project.
Yeah.
So I went there, I was speaking to one of the, one of the panelists, and I asked, are the children in your school always happy? I just asked that question as if, not mockingly, but you're giving me tall expectations of the schools. I mean, unschooling, however you want to call it. I said, are your children always happy? I was shocked at the answer she gave me. She said, children call me on Sunday saying, can I come to school today?
Yeah.
What are you saying? I said, no, they are like that. They're very happy. They're very, very happy. Which means that happiness is not just external happiness. For a child is never an external happiness alone. But inside they feel so comfortable and cocooned, and still there's that preservation of the innocence which they enjoy. And that was so interesting to hear. And there were parents sitting in front of the panel, and they were agreeing to it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is another world altogether that I've not thought about. Being a mother of three, maybe I should be thinking about it, because I have to set my children up for a growing world, a developing world. I want to speak a little bit more about your journey building the school, Akka. It's not easy to run a school today, financially as well, right? And I know when I was reading your profile about the school, there was a point in time you had to ask for help.
Yes.
And, and you've also mentioned that the parents came forward to pitch in at that point. There are two things that were very interesting to me. The thought to ask for help. Number one. And the second thing is that, to be so open and accept that help when it came in. I find it very difficult, there's this little thing called ego that all of us have, which is important, no doubt. But it comes in way when you really want to do something in life. And then, my father has always told me, since when we were kids, ask for help. And that it's etched in our heads. Ask for help. Only if you ask, you will get help. But I find it very difficult, even for me sometimes, to go, out of the way and say, I need help. Can you tell me what is running in your mind? Because it was not an easy thing to do. And, to be weak in front of the people who have put their children in your school. It's not easy. It's not a joke. How did that happen? I mean, where did you find the courage to do it?
I think I'm learning a lot about being vulnerable. Right? And that was one of my earliest lessons in vulnerability. There came a time where the school building, we were outgrowing that building, and we were under the trees, and and we needed the high school building, and we realized that if we had to go to the bank, the interest rates would impact the operations of the school. And we said, okay, let's go to the parents and not ask them for donations, but ask them for interest-free loans. Which means you had to share with them your operations and your P&L. You had to share with them the fact that on your own, you're not going to be able to do it. And you had to ask them, right? I think it was a personal journey at that time to say, am I willing to be vulnerable?
Yes.
Am I willing to hold my fears of how that vulnerability may be perceived?
Correct.
I still remember, and I had to meet about 300 parents, and I realized that to stand in front of 300 parents and to say that we don't have the resources and we need to have your support, should we have to do this? And we must do this because we don't have space anymore in the school. And I felt like, I didn't have the courage to meet 300 parents at one time. So we made small groups of about 30 parents.
Okay.
So it was still possible to sit in a circle and talk to them in a more intimate way. And when the first meeting happened, and I remember a few minutes after that meeting, a parent who had just finished the meeting, he had gone somewhere and then he came back. And my colleague said, he's waiting to see you. And I said, yes. And, I thought he had some questions. And he gave me a little envelope and he said, here's the first check. And that was 1 lakh. And he said, I'm just leaving this with you because I know you're going to do 20 other meetings. I need you to know that, this dream is so pure and, you're going to be supported. And I think in that time, in the next few weeks, we raised about 1.83 crores. The money that went into the seed of the new high school building. And therefore, every time I stand in the high school building and I tell this to myself, that this building is a testament of people's love for this vision.
God.
Love for this dream. And I often now say that it isn't my dream, it's a shared dream. And it is really a shared dream because everyone feels invested in this dream. I think I learned something very valuable about being vulnerable. And now I think I've had experiences where I think even in a classroom, for instance, when you've done a lesson very badly last week and when you meet the children again in a fresh week and to say, what class, I don't think I managed very well. When I reflected about it over the weekend, either a conversation or a lesson, and I want to begin that in a different way. And I think I bring that vulnerability in many spaces and I feel that it then becomes very real, very authentic, very human. I've never felt that vulnerability has ever been exploited. I think it moves and it brings that shared humanity into that space, which is richer than some kind of fortified strength, which is unreal to be projected.
So beautiful. The idea that the parents also have their children at the center of everything.
Yeah.
And they want to, to its true sense, build a community.
Yeah.
I don't have words to, say this, but beautiful. I mean, in all sense, so pure and so much love in just the words that you're telling me now. I mean, I can only imagine when I come to the space, what it would be like.
Yeah.
So one of the, things that has been debated quite a bit, in relation to what we've just spoken, is the school fee structure these days. It's a pocket burner in many schools, but somehow you've still managed to keep it, pretty moderate. It's great how you are able to do. How do you, manage that part of it? Because to think of the parents, they could be, the affordable category or not. But think of the parents and, see what best you can do with, what you have. To also have a community to support, teaching community that can support this, where people have a lot of, aspirations to earn money. It's a lot of work to, keep doing that consistently. And what kind of, what spectrum of students do you have within this community? Because that's also something very, something very unique to every school.
Yeah.
So what kind of people put their children in here? What is your acceptance process like?
I think when you talk about the fee structure, Gayathri, it's like a polarity, right? On one side, you have the complex task of running a school.
Yes.
And I must say, while there's physical infrastructure and navigating through many things for which you need a lot of financial health.
Mm-hmm.
I think the unfortunate part is there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy in our country to navigate. And I think schools find themselves very vulnerable in that context for exploitation. So one has the tough task of navigating that. Yeah. So it's not easy.
Yes.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you want education to be equitable, to be accessible, to be fair, and to honor what a heterogeneous community, if you need to build that and not just an elitist school.
Correct.
How do you do that? So it's a tough one, to balance these two polarities. I think if you ask me honestly, like, is our school like the champagne of the privileged? I mean, I think to some degree, yes, right? And I think as far as our school is concerned, it's not so much about the financial segment in the society as much as it's about anyone who feels drawn to an ideology like this. Yeah. And I think that's what we are looking for. And within that, of course, we do have an accommodating fee structure where a parent finds meaning, value, is aligned to this philosophy, but is not able to meet it at a financial lens. And then the school has support systems. And yet I think what we do is too small and negligible. Is there an aspiration to change it? Yes, there is an aspiration to change it. And what happens is, I think in the early years of the school, like let's say the first decade and more, you're really working with infrastructure building. Yeah. And I imagine the merit of an easier financial structure probably may benefit the next generation of families, because this generation of families contributed to that. And I think, we live in an interdependent world, so I think we can accept that. Yeah, so we have, at the heart of it, we have said, we don't want to become a school for a certain elitist community only. And we bear the responsibility of being a school that works with the privileged children. I think both of it are our realities and our truth. So when we do admissions, we sit with the purview of inclusion in terms of where our children are coming from, the composition of gender. So all of this goes into the thinking. Are we happy in terms of the school community and how inclusive it is? At the moment, we are not happy. Can we do things differently to be more inclusive? Yes, we can be. Because we are inclusive of children with varying abilities and varied learners. And we are inclusive of children who come from a different economic strata. But I think what we do is nothing really to talk home about.
But to admit that is a big thing.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. I know that to be, successful is the next step, but behind every person with a dream, every person that wants to walk a different path, there's an entire village. I want to know who your village is, because it's not an easy dream that you have pursued. And this village also has to endure everything along with you, right? So who is this village?
I think my village is really my community, my family. I think they've sacrificed more than my husband, his family. I think my family has sacrificed a lot for me to do this work. I think my college of teachers, they've made this their dream. I think my friends, the spiritual world. I think my village is large, and the whole community, actually, the community that stood by the work, that's made this work their work. So it's a large village, and I'm really, really grateful for that village.
To have an understanding set of people to, always be there to support you when, even with the craziest of ideas.
Yeah. And the children are also a big part of my village. Yeah. think they've been a big part of the village. At some point, for something we had said that, the school doesn't have resources to make this football ground or something. And I remember one child who had saved some 23 rupees and put it in an envelope with a beautiful letter saying, Akka, I would like to gift this to the school so you can make the football ground.
Oh,
and I was saying like, oh, this is the most precious 23 rupees I have to make the football ground.
Oh
so I think
God.
the children are also part of that village, right? In terms of the spirit that they bring, our teachers and mentors, this whole world of education and people who bring their generosity to offer this work to us in India. So I think my village is really large.
Wow.
And I'm very grateful for it.
The more I keep hearing, I feel like I should have been in that school. Because I used to be like that, the 23 rupee child, I was that child.
Oh, you were that child.
So, I mean, I feel like, I want to relive my childhood in a space like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I would be a different person. I don't know, but, so lovely. So, one thing that is so interesting that I read again in your profile was that you have included spiritual education for children within your school. What has your spiritual journey been like? And why do you think it's necessary for children to have spiritual education? Because the idea of spirituality is something that starts in the later years of life, right? That's what we've always been, I won't even say taught, but that's what we've been seeing. In our previous generations and our own generations, people say that this is not my time to be spiritual. This is my time to, go and win the world, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So why is spiritual education for youngsters, and what has your experience been for you to inculcate this within your curriculum?
I think if I look at my own childhood, what offered me sanity, hope, resilience, courage, joy was really the fact that the ground beneath my feet was my spiritual life. I had an inner life. I recognized there was something beyond this everyday life. I was a seeker of that world always. Even if I remember my time as a child, I was seeking that. In the way I knew it as a child. And as I was growing up, I think I was seeking it more and more. And now I feel like really that's my ground. That's the ground on which I stand. I think that's part of the school because at Yellow Train, we see the school as a living organism. It's not just a building or the number of children. It's a living organism. And it has a spiritual character and a presence and a being to it. And we feel sort of enveloped in that grace. I mean, that's really how I experience it. And for the children, why is this important? Because, they say adolescence mirrors the psychosis of our times. And today, if you look at the adolescent, the young people, I mean, the kind of opportunities they have to go astray, be it alcohol, drugs, losing themselves, addictions. Yeah. I think it's just showing us that it's very difficult to be a child in the time that we live in. And they're really mirroring the psychosis of the adult world.
Yeah.
Right? And if they don't have a spiritual ground to stand beneath, I think it's dangerous. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious. Because I think, my guru used to say religion divides and spirituality unites. And I believe that. And I think by spiritual, what I mean is an inner anchoring, questions about life, death, destiny, I think a space in yourself that you can retreat into. It could even be from the Buddhist breathing and mindfulness to finding solace and comfort in nature to, it could be any form of force that's larger and beyond the human condition, right? And I think if we don't give it to the children, I think it's a disservice. And I do think young people need to carry that with them before they go into the world, because it's a space that they can anchor themselves in a stormy world. And they're certainly going into a stormy world, right? So, I think it's a very, very important, I've accompanied this child who said, I'm an atheist and I'm an agnostic. I don't even care about the existence of God. That indifference is why I'm an agnostic, and so on and so forth. And I know this young person met with a very, very, very difficult moment in her life and later recalled how that evening she lit a candle and she prayed. to whatever forces she prayed, I think it was just a moment of just anchoring in oneself, in surrendering to something. And I think like even if they resist it at a time where you are presenting it to them, not indoctrinating, but gently offering opportunities to tune into these forces, they will use it when they need it. And if you've given them that, I think that's comforting.
It's amazing. And I think with that, my questions for you for today are over. I have so many things brewing in my head, going on and on about, how interesting and amazing your journey has been, and how you've made this world a better place by, the service that you're doing. I say service because it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not an easy journey to walk.
Yeah.
You could have done so many things to keep your things easy, but you didn't choose to do that. You've also evolved as a person.
Yes.
And that itself is so inspiring. So I have a little last segment where I want to do a rapid fire with you. Just one word or one sentence. I have a list of things that I have. I'm just going to bounce it off and then you tell me what you think about. Love.
Love for me is what we live for.
Respect.
I think respect is non-negotiable in any relationship.
Money.
I have a poor relationship with it.
Children.
They're the love of my life. All the children in the world. Yeah.
Best advice you have received?
To listen to your heart when in doubt. Not the head.
Not the head. How do you differentiate the voices?
I think I know the rational thinking brain. I know when the head drives it, and I know the gut, something that comes from the body, from the heart, right? I know to discern this. Yeah.
One advice you would like to give for young parents?
Just love your children. Don't worry about too many other things, their future, their board, their studies, and offer them that relational space with yourself.
The one person you always look up to?
I think there are so many people, but I think it's been my gurus.
Thank you so much, Akka. It's been a great pleasure. I think one of the most satisfying conversations, I must say. Because I myself came with so many things in my head. I want to know this, I want to know that. Because I'm in that state of, I won't say confusion, but also trying to find what my child requires.
Yeah.
And how I can help in, giving him, what he requires. The need of the hour for me, and I'm sure for many people as well. Thank you.
Thank you for this
so much.
very valuable conversation, Gayathri.
I hope you were not too conscious about
Not at all
all of this. Great.
Thank you.